I was labeled a troublemaker for asking one question. They whispered I didn't belong, that my daughter was disruptive. But when a billionaire walked into that room and heard my story, everything changed. Because 30 years ago, he was that child, and someone denied him too. If you've ever felt invisible, ever been told you're too much or not enough, stay with me. This story will shake you. Hit that like button if you believe every child deserves a chance. And subscribe because you won't want to miss what happens next. My name is Camila Rodriguez, and I never thought I'd become the kind of mother who fights school boards and makes scenes in marble hallways. I'm the woman who keeps her head down, works her 2 jobs, pays her rent on time, and smiles even when my feet are screaming from standing all day. But there's something about watching your child's light dim that changes you. It transforms you into someone you didn't know you could be. Sophia is 7 years old. She has these enormous brown eyes that seem to hold entire galaxies. And when she laughs, it sounds like music. She's the kind of kid who asks why the sky is blue and then isn't satisfied until she understands the science behind it. She memorizes facts about planets and recites them while we eat breakfast. She's brilliant. But Sophia has auditory processing disorder, which means her brain receives sound differently. She needs accommodations, a little extra time, sometimes visual aids, instead of just verbal instructions. To me, these are small adjustments. To the world, apparently, they make her a problem. We live in Ashwood Heights, which sounds lovely until you realize it's one of those places where your address determines your future. The wealthy families live in the hills, with their iron gates and their pristine lawns. We live on the edge, in a duplex where the heater rattles and the walls are thin enough to hear our neighbor's television through the night. But Sophia's test scores were exceptional. 98th percentile in reading comprehension. Perfect marks in creative problem solving. When Ashwood Preparatory Academy held their open enrollment, I thought maybe, just maybe, merit would matter more than our zip code. The rejection letter arrived on a Tuesday. Cream-colored paper, embossed letterhead, words that were polite and cold. After careful consideration, we regret to inform you that Sophia Rodriguez is not a good fit for Ashwood Preparatory's educational environment at this time. Not a good fit. I must have read those words 50 times, each time feeling them land differently. Not smart enough. No, her scores were perfect. Not worthy. Not the right kind of family. I knew what they meant. They saw her IEP, her individualized education program, and decided she required too much effort. Something in me cracked that day, but not in the way you might think. I didn't break. I ignited. I called the school and requested a meeting with the admissions board. The secretary on the phone sounded surprised, like parents in my position usually just accepted rejection and moved on quietly. She put me on hold for 7 minutes before coming back with a date. 3 weeks away. They were making me wait, hoping I'd forget, hoping I'd disappear. Those 3 weeks were torture. Every time I picked Sophia up from her current school, I felt the weight of other parents' stares. Word travels fast in small districts. They knew I was challenging Ashwood. Some looked at me with pity, others with something that felt like contempt. A woman named Patricia, whose son was already enrolled at Ashwood, actually pulled me aside one afternoon. She touched my arm with her manicured hand and said in the sweetest, most poisonous voice, "Camila, maybe it's best not to push where you're not wanted. There are other schools." I smiled at her and said nothing, but inside I was screaming. My boss at the diner, a gruff man named Stan, who rarely showed emotion, warned me about taking time off for what he called school drama. He said it casually while wiping down the counter, but I heard the threat underneath. Jobs like mine are replaceable. Women like me are replaceable. That's what the world kept telling me. But Sophia isn't replaceable. She's irreplaceable. And I would walk through fire for her. The night before the board meeting, Sophia climbed into my bed. She does this sometimes when she can't sleep, curling into me like she did when she was tiny. She asked me a question that nearly broke me. "Mama, why don't they want me?" I held her close, breathed in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, and told her the truth. "Baby, they don't know you yet. And some people are afraid of what they don't understand, but we're going to help them understand." She fell asleep in my arms, trusting me completely. I stayed awake until dawn, terrified I was about to let her down. The Ashwood Preparatory Administration building looks like something out of a movie about old money and older traditions. Marble floors, oil paintings of stern-looking founders, chandeliers that probably cost more than I'll earn in a lifetime. I wore my best dress, the navy one I saved for important occasions, and heels that made my feet ache before I even walked through the door. The security guard at the entrance looked at me like he was calculating whether I belonged there. I showed him my appointment confirmation, and he waved me through without a word. The boardroom was designed to intimidate. A long mahogany table that could seat 20 high-backed leather chairs, windows that overlooked the school's pristine campus. 15 board members sat waiting, and every single one of them looked like they'd never worried about rent or groceries, or whether they could afford to fix their car when it broke down. At the head of the table sat Veronica Ashwood Pierce, granddaughter of the school's founder, a woman whose face I'd seen in local society pages. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with blonde hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful, and a smile that never reached her eyes. I presented my case, with shaking hands but a steady voice. I showed them Sophia's test scores, her assessments from educational psychologists, examples of her creative work. I explained auditory processing disorder in simple terms, showed them research about how minor accommodations lead to extraordinary outcomes. I talked about Sophia's dreams, her love of learning, her potential. Every word I spoke felt like I was offering pieces of my daughter to strangers and begging them to see her value. Veronica listened with that practiced expression of polite attention that means someone isn't really listening at all. When I finished, she folded her hands on the table and spoke in a voice that dripped with false sympathy. "Ms. Rodriguez, we appreciate your passion. Truly, but Ashwood Preparatory has maintained certain standards for over a century. We have a responsibility to all our students to maintain an environment conducive to excellence." I felt my jaw tighten. Sophia is excellent. Her scores prove that. "Scores are only one factor," another board member interjected. This was Jeffrey Whitmore, a silver-haired man in a suit that probably cost 3 months of my rent. We observed Sophia during her campus tour. She was, shall we say, disruptive. The word hit me like a slap. Disruptive. She asked questions. She was engaged and curious. She asked excessive questions, Veronica corrected, her smile still plastered on. She distracted other prospective students. Some children thrive better in different environments better equipped to handle their particular needs. There it was, the coded language, the polite discrimination. I wanted to scream, to flip that enormous table, to make them see what they were doing. Instead, I said, as calmly as I could manage, "You're denying my daughter because she needs help hearing, not because she can't learn. You're denying her because you don't want to make minimal accommodations. That's discrimination." Veronica's smile finally disappeared. Her eyes went cold, reptilian. "This meeting is over, Ms. Rodriguez. Our decision is final. Security will show you out." I didn't move. For 10 seconds that felt like 10 hours. I sat there, staring at these people in their expensive clothes, at their expensive table, in their expensive building. And I saw them for exactly what they were. Not guardians of excellence, gatekeepers of privilege. And they were slamming the gate in my daughter's face. When I finally stood and walked out, there were parents in the hallway, prospective families on tours, current parents picking up their children. Someone had their phone out, filming. I heard the whispers start before I even reached the exit. By the time I got to my car, my hands were shaking so badly, I could barely get the key in the ignition. The video went viral in local parent Facebook groups within hours. Aggressive mother confronts elite school board. The comments were vicious. People who'd never met me, never met Sophia, felt qualified to judge us both. She's playing the victim card. Some kids just aren't cut out for competitive schools. Maybe focus on improving your situation instead of demanding special treatment. I read every comment, let each one cut into me, and then I did something that surprised even myself. I filed a formal discrimination complaint with the district. Sophia saw the video. A classmate's parent had shared it, and somehow it made its way to her. She came home from school quiet, retreated to her room, and when I finally coaxed her out, she asked if she was bad, if she'd done something wrong. I held her and cried, which I'd promised myself I wouldn't do in front of her, and I told her she was perfect. But I could see the doubt in her eyes. The world had planted a seed there, and I didn't know how to dig it out. 2 weeks passed, 2 weeks of waitressing tables, and avoiding eye contact with other parents, and lying awake at night wondering if I'd made everything worse. And then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Miss Rodriguez? This is Helen Chen, from the district superintendent's office. We're reopening your case against Ashwood Preparatory. There will be a formal hearing in 1 week. My heart stopped. Why? What changed? There was a pause on the other end. Someone has requested to attend the hearing. Someone with significant interest in the case. Who? Another pause. Julian Cortez. I had to sit down. Julian Cortez. Everyone in the state knew that name. Self-made billionaire, tech innovator, the kind of success story people write books about. He'd invented some kind of revolutionary data encryption software in his 20s and built an empire from it. He was worth $8 billion, gave millions to charity, and was Ashwood Preparatory's largest donor. And he wanted to attend my hearing. The second hearing felt different from the moment I walked in. The room was packed. Journalists, lawyers, district officials. And in the back row, wearing a simple dark suit and no tie, sat Julian Cortez. He was in his early 50s, I guessed, with gray threading through his dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. When our eyes met, he nodded slightly. I had no idea what to expect. Veronica was there again, but her confidence seemed shakier. She kept glancing at Julian, her smile more forced than before. The hearing began the same way. I told Sophia's story again, my voice stronger this time. I'd practiced in the mirror every night for a week. I presented the same evidence, the same arguments, and Veronica responded with the same rehearsed justifications, the same coded language about fit and standards. And then Julian Cortez raised his hand. The room went silent. Even the journalists stopped typing. The superintendent running the hearing looked surprised, but nodded. Mr. Cortez, did you have something to add? Julian stood slowly, and suddenly he was the only person in the room. I'd like to address the board, if I may. Veronica's face went pale. She couldn't refuse him. He'd funded their new science wing, their scholarship program, their entire capital campaign. Of course, she managed. Julian didn't walk to the front. He spoke from where he stood, his voice quiet, but carrying to every corner of the room. 30 years ago I was Sophia. He paused, let that sink in. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood, not far from here. My mother cleaned houses. My father worked construction when he could find it. I had dyslexia, which wasn't well understood then. I loved learning, but I learned differently. When I was 7, my mother applied to Ashwood Preparatory Academy. I'd scored in the 99th percentile on their entrance exam. You could have heard a pin drop. I was rejected. The letter said I wasn't Ashwood material. My mother requested a meeting, just like Ms. Rodriguez did. She took time off work, wore her best dress, walked into a room full of people who looked at her like she was asking for something she had no right to ask for. And they told her no. They told her I would be better served in a school more suited to my needs. His eyes found Veronica. Your grandmother sat on that board, Ms. Ashwood Pierce. She signed my rejection letter. I still have it. Veronica looked like she might be sick. My mother worked 3 jobs to send me to St. Catherine's Academy across town. Smaller classes, teachers who saw potential instead of problems. I graduated valedictorian, got a full scholarship to MIT, built a company that's now worth $8 billion. But here's what keeps me up at night. How many other kids did Ashwood turn away? How many Sophias? How many children who could have changed the world if someone had just given them a chance? He pulled out a folder, handed it to the superintendent. My legal team spent the last 2 weeks investigating Ashwood's admissions practices. Over the past 5 years, they've rejected 78% of students with learning differences while accepting students with significantly lower scores who happen to have legacy connections or substantial family wealth. The pattern is clear, it's discriminatory, and it needs to end. The room erupted, journalists typing frantically, board members whispering to each other, Veronica sitting frozen, her perfect facade crumbling. I felt tears streaming down my face, but I didn't wipe them away. I just sat there, watching karma unfold in real time. But Julian wasn't finished. This is where the twist came that nobody saw coming, including me. "There's one more thing," Julian said, his voice cutting through the noise. He looked directly at me now. "Miss Rodriguez, I need to apologize to you." My confusion must have shown on my face, because he continued quickly. "6 months ago, my foundation donated $5 million to Ashwood Preparatory, specifically for their special education program. I was told it would be used to create inclusive classrooms, hire specialists, train teachers. I was told Ashwood was committed to serving all students." He turned back to Veronica. "Where did that money go?" Veronica's face went from pale to red. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. Julian's lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in a gray suit, stood up. "Our audit shows that only $600,000 of the $5 million went to special education resources. The rest was redirected to aesthetic campus improvements, a new fountain, landscaping, remodeling the administration building where we're sitting right now." The room exploded again. I felt dizzy. Julian had donated $5 million to help kids like Sophia, and Ashwood had stolen it. They'd taken money meant for vulnerable children and used it to make their campus prettier. "So you see," Julian said, his voice harder now, "this isn't just about Sophia Rodriguez, though her case is important enough on its own. This is about an institution that takes money earmarked for inclusion and uses it for exclusion, that promises to help children while systematically denying them entry, that values appearance over substance, legacy over merit, comfort over justice." The superintendent looked at Veronica. "Ms. Ashwood Pierce, do you have a response?" Veronica stood, her hands gripping the table. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "This is clearly a misunderstanding. I'll need to review our financial records more carefully. As for Sophia Rodriguez," she swallowed hard, "perhaps we were too hasty in our initial assessment. Perhaps." Julian's voice was ice. "Ms. Rodriguez's daughter is gifted. Her scores prove it. Her teachers confirm it. The only thing standing between Sophia and an excellent education at Ashwood was your prejudice, and now we all know it." The vote was unanimous. Sophia was accepted to Ashwood Preparatory Academy, effective immediately. The board committed to a complete review of their admissions practices, mandatory training on learning differences, and full accountability for the misused donation funds. 3 board members resigned on the spot. Veronica stepped down as board chair, though she remained on the board. For now, her perfect reputation, the legacy she'd inherited and hidden behind for decades, was in ruins. But Julian didn't stop there. In the hallway after the hearing, surrounded by cameras and reporters, he announced the creation of the Sophia Initiative, a $50 million scholarship fund specifically for students with learning differences who'd been rejected by elite institutions. Every child turned away would have a path forward. Every Sophia would have a champion. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, overwhelmed, while microphones were shoved in my face and questions came from every direction. Julian stepped in, deflected the press, and then he did something I'll never forget. He knelt down. This billionaire in his expensive suit knelt down on the marble floor. So he was eye level with Sophia, who I'd brought with me this time. "You're going to do amazing things," he told her. "Don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise." Sophia looked at him with those enormous eyes and asked, "Did you really get rejected too?" "I did. But you're really smart now." Julian laughed, a real laugh that made him seem younger. "I was really smart then too. They just couldn't see it. Just like they couldn't see it in you. But now they will." Sophia's first day at Ashwood Preparatory was on a Monday morning that felt surreal. Parents who'd filmed me, who'd called me names in comment sections, who'd told me to know my place. Some of them apologized. Most of them just avoided eye contact. I didn't need their apologies. I never did this for their approval. I did it because my daughter deserved better than their lowered expectations. A teacher met us at the entrance, a young woman with kind eyes, who introduced herself using a combination of words and sign language. Sophia's face lit up like a sunrise. This was what belonging looked like. Not forcing herself to fit into a space that rejected her, but finding a space that expanded to include her. By the end of that first month, 15 other students had enrolled at Ashwood through the Sophia Initiative. Children who'd been told no, who'd been labeled problems, who'd been denied because they didn't fit someone's narrow definition of worthy. The school was changing. Not perfect, not overnight, but changing. And here's what I learned through all of this. They tried to make me the villain for advocating for my child. They painted me as aggressive, unreasonable, someone who couldn't accept reality. But sometimes the villain is just a mother who refuses to be silent. Sometimes karma isn't some mystical force. It's the natural consequence of cruelty meeting courage. It's a man who remembered what it felt like to be denied and refused to let it happen to another child. It's a system finally forced to look at itself and reckon with its ugliness. Julian saw himself in Sophia because he remembered. He remembered what it feels like when the world tells you you're not enough. And instead of forgetting that pain, once he had power, he used his power to make sure other children wouldn't feel it. I didn't win because a billionaire saved us. That's not the story. I won because I never stopped fighting, even when fighting felt impossible, even when the whole world seemed to be telling me to sit down and shut up. Julian amplified my voice, gave it a platform it wouldn't have had otherwise, but the voice was always mine. The courage was always there. It just needed someone to hear it. Sophia is thriving now. She's in the robotics club, which she talks about constantly. She made 3 friends in the first week. Lily, who loves astronomy, Dexter, who can solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute, and Aisha, who wants to be a marine biologist. They have sleepovers and inside jokes, and that easy friendship that comes from being truly seen. The school still isn't perfect. There are still parents who whisper, still teachers who don't quite get it. But there's also a special education coordinator now, hired with the properly allocated funds from Julian's donation. There are quiet rooms for kids who get overstimulated. There are visual schedules and assistive technology, and teachers who actually understand that different doesn't mean less. And other parents are finding their voices too. I got an email last week from a mother whose son has autism. She'd been afraid to apply to Ashwood, afraid of rejection, afraid of fighting battles she couldn't win. But she saw what happened with Sophia, and now her son is enrolled too. She thanked me for being brave. I told her she was the brave one. Every parent who advocates for their child is brave, even when the world tries to convince us we're just being difficult. If this story moved you, if you've ever been underestimated or seen someone you love be dismissed, let me know in the comments. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Hit subscribe, because there are more stories like this. Stories of people who refused to accept no when no wasn't fair. stories about karma finding its way to those who deserve it most. And remember, you are not the villain for demanding what your child deserves. You're a warrior. See you in the next one.